Welcome back to the deep dive. We are doing something a little different today. Usually we're looking at, business trends or history or maybe the latest tech breakthrough.
Right.
But today we are going to pull back the curtain on reality itself, and we are setting the dial for a very specific moment in time, Monday, October 21st, 1968.
Which is just a pivotal year. You have the Vietnam War raging, the civil rights movement is at its absolute peak, and the space race is reaching this fever pitch. It was a time of intense global tension, but also massive technological optimism.
Exactly. And on the specific Monday, the entire world is looking up. Apollo 7 has just landed that very morning.
Yeah.
It's the first crewed mission of the Apollo program, and it is a huge success.
Oh,
The astronauts, Shira, Eisel, Cunningham, they've just splashed down in the Atlantic. And the narrative on the news is basically, America is back. Science is winning.
It was the morale boost the country desperately needed after the tragedy of the Apollo 1 fire.
Yeah.
It was the proof that, that we could actually get to the moon.
Right. So you have millions of people glued to their TVs watching this absolute triumph of engineering. But at the exact same time, in a quiet living room in Elmira, New York, a woman named Jane Roberts is sitting in a rocking chair. And she is about to go on a trip that makes a moonshot look like a gentle stroll to the corner store.
We are talking, of course, about session 443 of the early sessions, book 9 of the Seth Material.
Yes. Now, before we unzip reality here, and trust me, it gets weird, we're going to get into some chilling and honestly pretty funny territory today. We need to handle the housekeeping. So this deep dive is distributed free of charge on all major platforms for educational purposes.
Yeah, we are here to analyze, explore, and maybe freak ourselves out a little bit today, not to sell you anything.
Exactly. But this is but if this conversation sparks something in you, if you want to understand the full depth of what we're discussing, you really need to go to the source. The insights we are unpacking today come directly from the Seth Material,
which is published by the New Awareness Network.
Right. Absolutely. We are giving you the highlights, the aha moments, but the real treasure is in the books themselves. So you can find them at sethcenter.com for the early-sessions. Please go support the publisher and keep this legacy alive.
Highly recommend it. So we have the setting. October 1968, Jane Roberts goes into a trance. Usually she speaks for Seth. And for any of you who might be totally new to this, let's just do a quick 10-second elevator pitch on who Seth is.
Okay, yeah, let's unpack this quickly. So Seth describes himself as an energy personality essence no longer focused in physical reality.
Which is a mouthful.
It is a mouthful, but basically he's a teacher. He's articulate, he's funny, he's benevolent. Through Jane, he dictated thousands of pages on the nature of consciousness and physics, and usually the vibe is very conversational.
Usually, yeah.
Yeah.
But session 443 is... well, it's different.
Very different. Because tonight, Seth doesn't start with philosophy. He starts with, honestly, it sounds like corporate espionage or cosmic espionage.
He starts with what researchers call evidential data. Specific, verifiable facts about the physical world that Jane Roberts, just sitting in Elmira, simply shouldn't have known.
Right. He goes right for Apollo 7. Now remember, the newspaper headline from that day, which is actually included in the source material notes, it says topsy-turvy landing, but it reports that the astronauts were in high spirits. It was billed as a perfect mission.
Yeah, that was the PR version. NASA needed a win.
But Seth comes through and immediately starts raining on the parade. He says, and I'm quoting here, "A note regarding your astronauts and their latest excursion."
He sounds like a disappointed professor.
He really does. And he continues, "New developments involving the ionosphere have been made during this trip, and to your scientists, unpleasant ones, since they do not conform to previous theories."
Let's pause on that word, unpleasant.
Yeah.
Because in the scientific community, especially during the Cold War, unpleasant usually means expensive, confusing, or dangerous.
Right.
The ionosphere is that layer of the atmosphere filled with charged particles ions. It's crucial for radio communication. And in 1968, our models of how it worked were, let's just say, optimistic.
And Seth claims the ions were not behaving precisely as they should. He talks about variations in their activity that were totally unpredictable based on the math the scientists were using back on Earth.
This is fascinating because he's essentially critiquing the scientific method of the time. He says their predictions were based on hypotheses that couldn't be checked until they actually went there. Basically, he's saying your math worked on the chalkboard, but the universe didn't get the memo.
And here's where it gets chilling. He says, the Russians have already discovered this.
Man, that adds a whole layer of Cold War intrigue to the session.
Doesn't it?
Because if the Soviets knew the ionosphere was unstable, They certainly weren't sharing that data with NASA. Seth is acting as a bridge for information that was likely classified or totally unknown to the American public at that moment. He's tapping into a knowledge base that just transcends borders.
And he even predicts a scapegoat. He says the scientists will initially think, quote, an error was made on the part of one in the ship who worked certain controls, so they're going to blame the pilot.
But he adds that other data from other controls will prove that no error was made.
Yep.
So he's predicting the internal bureaucratic fight at NASA before it even happens.
Now let's get to the astronauts themselves. Shira, Isley, Cunningham. The crew of Apollo 7 was famous for being grumpy. I mean, they had head colds, they were snapping at mission control, they even refused to wear their helmets during re-entry. They were notoriously irritable.
Yeah, the history books blame the head colds and the stress of command. It's the standard explanation. They were just tired.
But Seth says, wrong. Well, partially wrong. He blames electromagnetic variations at that specific orbital.
This is a key insight that I think we still haven't fully grappled with in modern space travel. Seth is suggesting that human biology is tuned to the specific electromagnetic frequency of Earth's surface.
Right, because we evolved here.
Exactly. We evolved in this specific magnetic field.
Yeah.
When you put a human body in orbit, you are removing it from the stabilizing field it relies on. You are fundamentally altering the electrical environment of their nervous system.
And he gets incredibly specific about the symptoms. He says the report will show an erratic rather than smooth nervous reaction. And this is the detail that really got me, he mentions, quote, some difficulty in finger movements.
That is such a granular detail.
Yeah.
Some difficulty in finger movements.
Yeah.
I mean, if you were faking a psychic trance, you'd say something vague like they felt a disturbance in the force or they felt dizzy.
Yeah, you'd be general.
You wouldn't say their fingers were twitching.
Because it implies a disruption of fine motor skills.
Precisely. And for a test pilot, fine motor skill is everything. These guys are the best of the best. If you reach for a toggle switch to fire a thruster and your finger flutters, that is terrifying. It attacks their core identity as competent pilots.
It explains the irritability so much better than a head cold does. If your body is betraying you because the magnetic field is wrong, you're going to be panicked. And in that masculine military culture of 1968, panic looks like anger.
And Seth says this data will be confidentially reported, meaning NASA would bury it. And it makes sense. If the environment of space makes human hands stop working correctly, that puts the moon landing, which was the ultimate goal, and hadn't happened yet, in serious jeopardy.
Seth says exactly that. He says this discovery will make them feel less secure about landing on the moon.
It just completely crumbles the confidence in the model. If the medium you have to travel through is hostile to your nervous system, the engineering of a rocket honestly doesn't matter.
So we start the session with this very physical, scientific takedown of the space program. It grounds us. It makes you think, okay, this entity actually knows what's happening in the real world.
Right. It establishes credibility. It's the hook. It proves he's watching.
And then he just pulls the rug out.
Completely. He pivots from physics to metaphysics in a heartbeat.
Halfway through the session, Seth says, there is also someone else involved in it this evening. He basically says, I'm bringing in my boss.
He introduces the entity. Now, we need to clarify this for you listening. In the Seth cosmology, what we call a person, even a personality like Seth, is just a fragment of a larger whole self or entity.
Like a Russian nesting doll structure of consciousness.
Exactly.
Right.
We are the smallest doll. Seth is the medium doll. The entity is the big doll that holds them all.
And Seth steps aside. He lets the big doll speak through Jane.
And the change in Jane was drastic. Rob, her husband, wrote detailed notes about this in the transcript of the session.
Yeah, he describes the voice as high, clear, distant, and sexless.
Sexless is a very important descriptor here. Seth is usually male-identified. He has this booming baritone quality. He flirts. He jokes around. This new voice had no gender. It suggests a state of being that has evolved past biological duality. It's not he or she, it just is.
Rob also notes the pacing. He says it was fast, mechanical, and the sentences ended on an upbeat, like it wasn't even stopping to think.
Because it doesn't need to think. Thinking implies processing time. It implies you have to search for the answer. This entity is operating from a level of direct knowing. It's just streaming raw data. It's like hooking a fire hose up to a kitchen faucet.
And the message coming out of this fire hose, it's humbling. I mean, that's a polite way to put it. It's kind of insulting to us.
It's definitely a blow to the human ego.
The entity looks at us, looks at our rockets, our wars, our skyscrapers, our Apollo missions, and says, You are like children with a game, and you think that the game is played by everyone.
This is the central metaphor of the section, the blocks.
Right. The entity says we are children sitting on the floor playing with blocks. The blocks are physical matter, atoms, molecules, gold bars, real estate.
And we are totally obsessed with them. We think the blocks are reality. We think we are made of blocks.
The entity says, quote, you see physical bodies and suppose that any personality must appear in physical terms. And then the hammer drop. None of you are physical. That which is enduring is not physical.
None of you are physical. I mean,
And
just sit with that for a second.
yeah.
We aren't physical beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings trapped in a misunderstanding that we are physical.
The entity basically mocks our idea of progress. He says we think progress is just building bigger blocks.
Which, if you look at human history, is true. We went from stone huts to skyscrapers,
Yeah.
from spears to intercontinental ballistic missiles. It's just moving matter around and making the piles higher.
Yeah.
We judge our success by the size of the pile.
And the entity is like, that's cute, but that's not growth. That's just stacking.
True growth, according to this entity, is realizing you aren't the blocks. It's realizing you are the player.
But the player is scary.
The player is huge.
This is where we get the title of this deep dive. The entity gives us this image. He says, quote, later in your time, all of you will look down into the physical system like giants peering through small windows and smile.
It's a haunting image. I want you to imagine you are playing with Legos in your living room. You are totally focused on the little plastic castle. You think the castle is the whole world. And then you glance up at the window, and there's a face the size of a mountain looking in.
And the face is you.
That's the twist. The giant isn't a monster. It's your future self, or your whole self. It's the part of you that isn't playing the game.
The entity says they nurse the system, they protect it. We have helped nurse it along by our energy.
It changes the vibe from horror to caretaking. You know, a parent watches a child play. They don't intervene unless the child is about to actually hurt themselves. They just watch. They provide the energy, the food, the safety for the game to continue.
But here is the problem with these high-concept metaphors. Jane Roberts wasn't just hearing them, she was actually feeling them.
Right. And this is where the session goes from a cool philosophy lecture to a psychological thriller.
Rob writes that suddenly Jane cried out. She started shaking her head violently. A glass of beer that was on the table gets knocked flying.
It's a chaotic scene. This wasn't a peaceful, eyes-closed meditation. This was a physical shock to her system.
Jane is screaming. Rob and their friend John Bradley, who was there, they have to jump up and grab her just to keep the rocking chair from flipping over backward. She is completely panicked.
Seth explains later that this was an experience in concepts.
What does that mean, really? Experience in concepts.
Well, usually we use words to describe ideas.
Right.
If I want to tell you about something big, I say the word huge. You hear the word and your brain imagines bigness. But the word huge isn't actually big. It's just a symbol.
Right, it's just a label we agree on.
The entity apparently doesn't just use labels.
Yeah.
It transmits the reality of the concept. So when it talked about the giant, it didn't just describe a giant. It made Jane become the giant.
Her notes on this are absolutely terrified. She says, suddenly my own body and the room and John and Rob began to get larger and larger, really massive.
She describes her organs growing. She literally felt the shapes expanding inside her.
She says the room felt big enough to take up the entire city of Elmira. But, and this is the really trippy part, everything kept its relative scale. So she didn't feel like a giant squished in a tiny dollhouse. She felt like a giant inside a giant house.
It's a radical shift in proprioception, which is the internal sense of your body in space. She was feeling the scale of the entity's consciousness.
And then the flip side happens, the contraction.
Because if you can expand to the size of a city, you can also shrink down to a speck.
She describes a microscopic shrinking, a sense of desolation.
She visualizes this inverted pyramid. The roof of her house is the wide top of the pyramid, and she is at the tiny sharp point at the very bottom.
And looking down through the top of that pyramid is the giant face.
A giant face peering down into the room as through a microscope.
That is straight up cosmic horror right there. To feel yourself shrinking away to absolutely nothing while a colossal intelligence examines you like a bacteria on a slide.
It brings up the concept of the sublime. In art and philosophy, the sublime is something so big and powerful that it practically destroys you just to look at it. It's awe, but it's also terror. Jane was touching the sublime. She was seeing the architecture of her own soul, and it scared her to death.
She says in her notes, it wasn't great, this experience, which I think is the understatement of 1968.
She was fighting for control. She says she couldn't find her voice because the entity was using it. And that loss of agency is a very primal fear.
She eventually manages to mentally find herself. She signals Rob. He touches her, and that physical contact kind of snaps her back, brings her back to the room.
But notice what happens next. She doesn't quit.
No. She takes a breath, probably looks at the spilled beer on the rug, and she goes right back in.
That speaks to her immense courage as an explorer. She knew she was on the edge of something profound. She was trembling, but she wanted to know what was on the other side.
She even says she passed Seth on the way back in.
I just passed Seth, and he joked with me something about a massive encounter.
Seth is the ultimate middle manager here. The boss just came in, completely terrified the employee, and Seth is there in the break room making puns. Massive encounter. Get it? Because you felt massive.
Humor is a grounding mechanism. Seth knows exactly what he's doing. By making a joke, he's telling her, "You're okay, don't take it too seriously, it's just a ride." He's diffusing the fear so she can actually continue working.
So Seth comes back through to clean up the mess, and he gives an explanation that is, frankly, mind-bending. He calls it a transmigration of systems.
This is the technical breakdown of what just happened to her.
Seth says consciousness does not take up space. You must understand this.
That is the axiom we really need to drill down on. Space is a property of the physical world. It's a stage prop. Consciousness exists entirely outside of the stage.
So when Jane connected with the entity, her consciousness was reduced to its essence. Seth calls it a speck.
Think of it like a singularity in physics. Infinite density, zero volume.
And when that speck, that pure, spaceless consciousness was dropped back into the physical world of chairs and bodies,
The contrast created the illusion of size.
Seth says, quote, children's blocks then become massive by contrast.
Because she was operating from a standpoint of no space, the re-entry into space felt completely overwhelming. The
Ooh.
physical world looked heavy, monstrous, and huge because she was momentarily viewing it from the perspective of the infinite.
So the room didn't actually grow, her perspective shifted.
Exactly. It's relativity. If you are infinite, everything finite looks strange. It looks like a toy. It looks like a block.
Seth says, it was not meant to be unpleasant.
Which really highlights the gap between the entity and us. The entity deals in raw data. It doesn't understand that for a human, feeling your liver expand to the size of a Buick is fundamentally unpleasant.
It reminds me of that line from the Bible. Every time an angel shows up, the first thing they have to say is, fear not, because they know they look terrifying to us.
Precisely. High-energy reality looks like destruction to a low-energy system. The entity was trying to give her a gift, the gift of perspective, but it felt like an attack because her nervous system just wasn't ready for that much voltage.
So we have this incredible session. We have astronauts with twitchy fingers up in orbit, and we have Jane Roberts shrinking under a cosmic microscope in Elmira. What is the takeaway for you, the listener? Why should you care about this nearly 60 years later?
I think there are two massive takeaways here. The first is validation.
You mean the Apollo connection?
Right. The fact that this session contains verifiable inside baseball details about the ionosphere and the crew's physiology details that directly contradicted the cheerful news at the time, it suggests that this isn't just Jane's imagination. It grounds the weirdness.
It gives you permission to take the giant part seriously, because the ionosphere part was real. If Seth was right about the fingers, maybe he's right about the soul.
Exactly. And the second takeaway is the metaphor itself, the blocks.
Physical life is not the rule.
We get so stressed about our blocks. We worry about our bank accounts. Those are blocks. We worry about our cars blocks. We worry about our status social blocks. We fight entire wars over who has the most blocks.
And the entity is saying, the blocks aren't you.
The blocks are just the game. You are the player. And the game is supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be educational. But it's not supposed to be everything.
There is a line where the entity says, one day you shall do so, meaning put away the blocks, but none of us would think of kicking aside your block constructions in ire.
They respect the game. They respect our little skyscrapers. They respect what we build. But they know that eventually we are all going to stand up and walk away.
It reframes death entirely, doesn't it?
Completely. Death isn't the end. It's just putting the toys away. It's closing the lid on the Lego box.
And realizing you were the giant all along.
And maybe looking into the window of another room to see who else is playing.
That is actually kind of comforting. In a spooky, I'm insignificant, but also infinite kind of way.
It's the ultimate paradox of mysticism. You are nothing and you are everything.
I want to leave you with a thought to mull over tonight.
What's that?
The next time you are stressed, The next time you are stuck in traffic or worried about a deadline or doom scrolling on your phone, just visualize the blocks.
See the car as a block. See the phone as a block.
And imagine, just for a second, that you are the giant looking in the window, just smiling.
It changes the perspective instantly. It takes the weight right off.
It really does. Look, we have barely scratched the surface of the Seth Material today. This was just one session out of hundreds and hundreds.
If this piqued your interest, you have to go to the source. Do not just take our word for it.
New Awareness Network. The book is the Early Sessions Book 9. You can find it at sethcenter.com/early sessions.
Read the raw data. Make up your own mind. There is so much more in there than we could ever cover in an hour.
And remember, this deep dive is for education. We aren't telling you to stop playing with your blocks.
No, please keep playing. The world needs good builders. We need people to solve problems and create beautiful things.
Just remember they're just blocks.
And keep an eye on the window.
Thanks for joining us on the deep dive. We'll see you in the next reality.
Take care.